as Donna mentioned, Great South East Queensland Weekender and Creek to Coast are the bread and butter of the production company I work for, TPD Media. There's certainly, we make TV commercials, we do documentaries. I produce a program for Channel 9 called Broncos Insider during the football season, but there's certainly 3 programs that we're proudest of and that consume a lot of the energy of the people that work in our office. Now, I think probably one of the things that our office and your offices have in common is that one of the favourites at the top of our online lists is the BOM, Bureau of Meteorology. We, as makers of lifestyle television, live and breathe whatever it is that the Bureau is going to tell us because, you know, we're time poor, we are production heavy, and certainly when I find out on a weekend, on my days off, that it's raining, I'm fine with that. If I find out that there's ill weather coming on a Monday or Tuesday, I wring my hands in despair because that means that all our shoot schedule is thrown into chaos, and we're worrying about things like cloud cover, rain, wind, tide, current. There's so many parameters that can affect our plans for the week. So I feel your pain, and I heard a few people talking about the weather so far this year. If that's the case, you know, I'm with you there. So we, as I said, make these programs. The Great South East is the one that I produce, and then I oversee the others. It's averaging about 300,000 viewers a week. On a Sunday afternoon at 5:30, probably about 250,000 Queensland-wide, and then we get a replay nationally the following Saturday in the middle of the day that brings us in another 50,000 or so people. So quite a good spread. We're really strong in the 25 to 54 age demographic, so universally, I guess, accepted and liked. So a really nice cross-section of families and young singles and then retirees. And we're mindful that we have a broad audience, so we're always trying to look for, you know, a fair mix of the sort of stories that we attach. Queensland Weekender. So Great South East is everything within a 300-kilometre radius of Brisbane. It's out and about in the Great South East is our sort of catch cry, I guess, and we're all about encouraging people while they're fine at 5:30 on a Sunday to sit and watch our show. The rest of the weekend we want them out and trying new experiences. It could be something as, you know, I guess as low-key as a craft class, but, you know, climbing Mount Barney or, you know, kayaking Palmerston Passage are certainly the sort of stories that are fodder for our show. Queensland Weekender alternates it, so it's on a Saturday afternoon, and it alternates between a week where there might be a journey from A to B. It might be the Great Green Way, Townsville to Cairns, or you know, it could be an outback travel via train and having a look at the pleasures of Longreach. The following week will be 4 or 5 stories from different regions around the state. So certainly Queensland, we're both programs are partnered by Tourism and Events Queensland, as I now have to remember to call them. So that means there's an onus on us to try and get out to as many of the regions or all of the regions in Queensland and try and give as equal weighting as we possibly can. Creek to Coast is the other program that we shoot each week, and it is our advertorial program. So it disappeared from screens a few years ago and was replaced by Queensland Weekender, but it's backed by popular demand on the proviso that it pays for itself. So the only way that happens is that your Hobie Cat or your Caravan in Queensland will buy some stories, a story or a block of 5 stories, and will self-fund their stories. Now the beauty for us is that we're really precious about keeping the show in our usual editorial style approach. So we then find out what product, and it might be, for instance, a Haynes signature bow rider boat that is to be profiled for Haynes this week, the Haynes Group this week. We'll ask the question, what sort of environment is that suited for, what sort of activities, and then we'll construct a story around that product. I guess, so Great South East is, Creek to Coast is harder to get involved in unless you have a spend, but by the same token, the caravan companies, the BCF, the four-wheel drive companies, the Cooper's tyres, they're always looking for venues to take these products. So, you know, there's I guess a weighting within the show of really trying to hammer home the good in the products, but also giving a bit of a help along to any of the businesses that can host us. You know, a four-wheel drive park, a caravan park, that sort of things. You know, you get something for nothing, I guess, as part of that creek to coast mix. So, plenty of opportunities for publicity, but it's surprising how few operators or ventures through Queensland take that opportunity. I would say that on average about 70% of the stories that we do are self-generated. So that means us going online and throwing in a Google search and coming up with an idea, coming across somebody at a park who talks about the fact that they have a book about mountain biking, and following that lead on. There are certainly viewer and operator letters or emails that we get from time to time. There are press releases, and then Channel 7 or some of our other program partners might sometimes say, look, you're obliged. For instance, RACQ had been a sponsor for quite some time, and we had an arrangement with them that once a month we'd do a story that promoted something to do with their website. So we do have obligations, but most of the time I'm thrilled to say I have free rein, and I'm looking for ideas, I'm hungry for ideas. So, why engage with us? I see there being so many benefits, a few of which are that presumably you want more people to visit or you want more people to register to your event. And there are only so many of them who are in the know, who are going to stumble across something on your website by accident, or who are going to hear about it word of mouth. So we are, as I said, we have a captive audience of 300,000 people, a fair percentage of whom might be interested in what you have to say or what you have to offer. It's free, and there's not much that comes free these days. We certainly, love the fact, and we were just having a brief conversation before, love the fact that we can go out on a whim and cover a story and then get these lovely letters from an operator or lovely feedback to say that we've managed to generate a bunch of business for them. And I've got a little category of my emails that has lovely stories of people whose, the farm stay whose business was saved because they had the nous to contact us and, suggest a story. Certainly we'll get some really big reactions to stories, really big immediate reactions to stories. Other times the information that we pop onto our website in fact sheets will sit there for months, and then we might find, or an operator might find out of the blue that come winter, quite a few people have remembered at the back of their mind that they saw something about Stanthorpe on our show and go trolling, and so we're able to help and give them a lead in that way. So certainly using us as a conduit to get more business, and when it's free, has to be a good thing. And it's just for the sake of writing an email. Our presenters are very hands-on. We have chosen presenters who are genuine and passionate about what they do. I guess it's a show of how much they enjoy their job that we don't have much of a turnover. You probably have seen a lot of our presenters age with the show, and in fact we've included their children in stories as babes on knees who are now teenagers, because we've had the same bunch of people come through our show for so many years. And that's because they genuinely enjoy the experiences that we're asking them to participate in. And I guess the advantage of being involved in a lifestyle show like ours is that you're getting more than a 15-second or 30-second snippet of, or time slot to sell your product. You're getting a presenter who wants to hop on that horse, or wants to jump in that canoe, or wants to chat to the person that's been there for the last 20 years, organising these children and seeing the best out of them and how they react to life outdoors. So it's not a hard sell. In fact, we think it's the opposite, but it's a genuine sell. And certainly I think that's the benefit sometimes of lifestyle television, that you're really getting people who can, you're letting the person at home get a real feel for what the experience would be like for them. We also find that a bit of business for one person in an area can generate good for a region or a community. An example of that would be Laidley, in that there was a particular B&B there, Brownell Homestead, that we did a story with a couple of years ago, and they were so accommodating and they were so welcoming, and they got so much out of the experience of working with us that we stayed connected. They had that, we became part of their network, and they often keep us informed of what's going on. So of course, when they had all the trouble again this year with the floods, there was an email straight to our office. I was able to contact 7 News and let them know that people there were doing it really tough, and there became a bit of a roll-on effect of different organisations, 4KQ and the like, going out to help and do their little bit, organising, a breakfast barbecue and things like that. So keeping that connection with us, can benefit down the track as well as it would in more immediate terms. We also encourage, in terms of community, that if you think you've got a good idea but not a great idea, or you think you've got the germ of an idea, that you get together with a couple of other like-minded businesses in the area, or complementary businesses in the area, and pitch as a group, and have 3 of you pitch from 3 different angles at me. That way, more bites of the cherry, and again, a roll-on effect for the community. Sometimes you'll find that you also get access, when we're talking about why engage the media, access to stories that we shoot that you can then have online yourself and stream online. There's a bit of paperwork involved and sometimes a minimal cost involved, but certainly we've, in the last year or so, provided people with the opportunity to be able to use the story on their websites, so they've got a ready-made clip on their sites. Unfortunately, that vision doesn't belong, the vision belongs to us. So this is probably something that Lachlan will bring up later as well. But there's also the opportunity to engage the media at your own, for your own agenda. So having the media come out and shoot some vision for you. So you've got stock footage, you've got stock images, so that when you're pitching to somebody else, or you're trying to sell a story to a magazine interstate, you've got something that you can supply to them. And we also have in the past worked quite closely with Tourism Events Queensland to do little webisodes and things like that for different regions around Queensland. I know they're in the midst of looking at things like that again at the moment. So there might be times when you do need to stick your hand in your pocket, but there's certainly the other reason for doing something like that might be that you buy a spot on Great Southeast, for argument's sake, because you have a strategy. There's a particular time of year that you really want to hit, and you know that sending a story idea into us, is I keep using the word on a whim, but it's at our discretion whether we run that story when it appeals to you that it be run. So you might try to be a bit more strategic about it and spend some money so that you get a story to air at the time that you really think it's going to be most opportune. Stand back a bit this time so you can see. All right. So how can operators get involved? The most important thing is to let us know what is going on. Don't presume that we have the finger on every pulse. There's a wonderful woman called Jodie who has just created a site called Must Do Brisbane, and I had a meeting with her recently, and she was telling me all these things that were happening around town that I wasn't aware of. And there's such a frustration in that, because I would think that people should be inundating us with information. That the more chances you get to get your information out there, the more chance that it'll be picked up. So we've decided to collaborate with our information just to make sure that nothing slips through the cracks. So we are working on very tight budgets. Television, as with newspapers, are doing it. But certainly there's nothing of the elaborate 1980s lifestyle that we enjoyed all the time with Christopher Skase, where money was no object and you could spend however much time you wanted to do anything. We are under the pump to produce a half-hour program with shooting for 5 days a week. We have smaller production teams, and we don't have a plethora of researchers sitting in the office, looking through Google, or we don't have the opportunity to go out and do recce's to check out a site before we have to shoot. So we need other people to be our eyes and ears on the ground. We're really relying on you letting us know if something happens. The problem with a Google search, of course, also is that you're getting the brochure version of the story. And I could probably think of 10 North Queensland boating, day cruises that I'd get very similar material from their, from their homepage on their website. One of them may have a fantastic story about a third-generation family that's been operating this business and that has a real story to tell, but I'm not likely to get that by clicking on a homepage or scrolling through or typing in Cairns Cruise. So that's the sort of information that we need and that we're not always going to ascertain in a Google search. It's also sometimes perhaps the lazy way that if I've got something at my fingertips and I'm in a bind, I'm going to go for that information. I'll think of an example that we were going to Towery Sheep Cheese Farm 2 weeks ago. Had all intentions of shooting that story on Monday morning, and Friday afternoon we got the warnings about the weather. So I had to come up with a story at the last minute that we'd be able to shoot in the rain, and somebody from one of the local Milton B&Bs had sent in a lovely typed letter that talked about their B&B. It triggered an idea in my head because it was literally sitting there beside my desk. Someone had opened the letter for me when I arrived. And from that I was able to do a bit of a search, find another 3 B&Bs in the area that and I probably tried 6, 3 of whom would love to have helped us but just weren't able to, and the lucky 3 who then were able to have us the following Monday and be involved in a story. So it was just fortuitous for them. I could have gone on any tack at all, but knowing that information was there at my fingertips certainly helped. The Great South East has been going strong. It celebrated 15 years on television last year, which is kind of phenomenal, particularly for Queensland television. And I think we're able to maintain the success of the show because we keep reinventing ourselves. We have a new audience, but certainly we have the same presenters. What we'll usually do, though, is alternate presenters. So if Martin Bauman's been out to Gordon Country the last couple of times we've done a story up at Goombra, then Sophie might go along this time. So we'll change presenters, we'll find new angles, and we like to think that you can do the same. So if we have been involved in your story, and shot a story with you, or been to your region, or dealt with a similar operator in any way, don't think that discounts us coming back. Certainly reinvent angles, and we're always keen to hear. There are a couple of businesses that spring to my mind, Lilydale Farmstay and Mount Barney, and sorry if I keep using B&Bs and farms as examples, but they're 2 operators that we know if we're in a bind, we can ring them and they'll come up with something straight away. They'll help us. They know the sort of things that make an interesting 3 or 4 minutes of television, and they'll come through with a nice colourful story when we need it. So we tend to not have our favourites, but certainly have our go-to people that help us out. Watch the shows is something I certainly recommend. Find out the difference between the Great South East, Queensland Weekender, and Creek to Coast. An example is the fact that the Great South East will only ever pre-promote events. We don't attend events because, to our mind, by then it's over with, there's no benefit to you and there's no benefit to us. So while we miss the colour and movement of an event, and we have the added challenge of having to mock something up, certainly we like to think that we then give people the opportunity to go to the event, so we're drawing people there. Go.
Fiona, I was just wondering, if we have footage of an event from a previous year, is it possible for you to utilise that in advance through that process, or is it more limited just to an announcement at the end of the show?
So certainly we will. Getting back to that point about us wanting to get our presenters involved, we would still probably mock something up. So floating, gosh, I can't think of the event that's coming up. I'll use Easter, I'm trying to think of an event. The Rathdowney Heritage Festival is an example. So we arranged for Sophie to go along and take on the women's champion in the cross-cut saw. And we had a horse and sulky rider who took her for a bit of a trot around. But then certainly we had the advantage of having some vision from the previous year to supplement it with. So that particularly would make it more attractive to us if we have some real vision to go with it. Another example, for instance, is, and this is probably as diverse from what your organisations are as I could possibly think, but QPAC, for instance, in a few weeks' time has Hot Shoe Shuffle coming, and we had a couple of the cast, the tappers, come up from Sydney last week to do a tap class with some little kids, which was, you know, great fodder for a story, and Laurel got involved and had great fun, but they had some stock footage of the production, so that will certainly be used to supplement it. But that's the way we're operating. We're trying to find some way of getting a bit of colour and movement and excitement into an event that's yet to come. Our colleagues at Queensland Weekender are the opposite. They will go to the event, they'll shoot it, with a mind to it being an annual event, or at least a biannual event. They'll shoot it because if they go out to Winton, to the Outback Festival, they know that they can hang on to that story for 4 months' time, and it might be generating interest for people to go the following year. So they'll sometimes hold on to some of the stories they shoot for 6 months. Particularly, for instance, if they go to Townsville and shoot 5 stories in Townsville in a week, they're likely to spread that out over a 10-month period, which I must imagine is incredibly frustrating for some operators who, you know, are rushed into putting a story together and then have to wait for it to come. But there is a method to our madness when we do things like that. So I mentioned working ahead of time. Weather and financial reasons really do dictate that we are super prepared. I was lucky in December to have shot quite a few stories that have been sitting on the shelf that we were able to play over this period when we had a cameraman who broke his foot and we had no cameraman for 5 weeks, and then the weather came in. So because of that, we rely on the people who are letting us know what's going on to give us plenty of warning. On average, we're shooting stories 4 to 6, sometimes 8 weeks ahead of schedule. So in the case of an event that's happening in 3 weeks' time, it might be going to air next week. To give people a bit of warning, we'd need to be shooting that at least 4 to 6 weeks earlier, which makes it hard when you're trying to get people together for an event-based story. But we like to think that between us we'll be creative enough to find a way to do that. And in terms of locations, it might be difficult if, for instance, you're promoting an event that's all about brass monkey season and it's actually quite mild at the moment, but we'll find a way to do that. And that means then that while I love to know what's going on, and if you're sending me your calendar through every couple of, once a month, I guess, there might be some useful information there we can put on our Facebook page. It's not much good to me to be getting a calendar 2 weeks ahead of a month, because by then we're already thinking about, you know, we're shooting at the moment for June. We do, as I said though, post on Facebook, and we have a little What's On segment of our show, so it's a 10-second mention with a bit of text to who, what, where, when. So please feel free to send any information through, even if you think you've missed the boat, because there might be a way of getting word out. And Facebook, we're really concentrating on minimising the number of pretty shots of our presenters out having a fun time, and maximising the number of community events or information about operators. We really want to be a conduit to people to find out what's going on. Be adaptable is a really big point when it comes to how to get involved with lifestyle television. I've mentioned that we only have small windows of opportunity to shoot. I've mentioned weather, mentioned illness. So there are lots of reasons why we might have to throw our plans up in the air for next week and pull something new together in a hurry. So the fact that we can call and find someone who can scramble is fabulous. In talking about other lifestyle television, not necessarily our own, and I spoke about getting to know what these programs are and the sort of stories they do, so you get a bit of a clear idea of who to pitch to and why. Also have a look at trends in television. Cooking shows are all the rage at the moment, and I know, for instance, Brits caravans or camper vans had an arrangement last year, I think, with MasterChef. So they were very clever in approaching that production house about, you know, using their kitchens in one of the challenges. So sometimes thinking a bit, you know, taking something from a different tack or looking at it from a different angle might, you know, bring you opportunities. I'm talking here, I guess, second-hand, because certainly I don't have anything to do with Sunrise, but to give you a bit of an idea how they operate, they would, and I guess my limited experience has been with events like the Audi Hamilton Island Race Week, where Hamilton Island would spend a substantial sum to get Sunrise there for a couple of crosses. Now, while they're in that region, they have to sometimes make the most of the opportunity that they've hauled all their gear up there, so there might be a few local operators that would benefit at no cost, but that's a bit of a stab in the dark. Certainly don't be afraid to let the Today shows and the Sunrises and those sort of, and any national shows know what you're up to, but they, yeah, certainly have budgets that they have to deal with too, so it's less likely that you'll be able to be strategic there unless you have money to spend with them.
Sorry, Fiona, is there a way of knowing with those sorts of shows where they are going to be? Is there any mechanism to determine, because they've got their own timelines? Like River Life, for example, managed to get on Sunrise last time they were in Brisbane, and location helped because it was filmed down there at Kangaroo Point Cliffs. But
I wouldn't be surprised if John had sent an email to Sunrise saying, this is who we are, this is what we do, and if you're ever in the area. So yeah, so they don't sort of make those production schedules public, but I guess it's a matter of, as I said, if they've got that information at their fingertips, it's going to make it a bit easier to get to them.
Who are the best people to contact? How do you find out who to contact?
So in terms of lifestyle television, I would always ask for the producer, or email the producer. Certainly, you know, in television newsrooms, it's the chief of staff. And I haven't really spoken about news today. I do have a background way back in the dark ages of being a news producer, but I don't feel that that's my area of expertise now. But I'm sure if you had any questions, I could certainly take them back to 7 News and find out answers for you. But producers would certainly be a starting point here. And as you'll see, I've left my contact numbers here, so I'm always a starting point. So let's just go through the how to pitch a story, and this is very sketchy, but it might get us thinking about how you know, how to sell, I guess. So what actually, before you start writing, I'll just save you all the trouble. Maybe if we pass these around. So what makes, you know, first thought, what makes your business, event or neighbourhood tick? So what is it that makes it stand out, or what makes it newsworthy, for want of a better word? What can you tell us, and these are some of the subjects that I've already brought up, what can you tell us that you won't find in a glossy brochure that's, you know, sitting in the North Stradbroke Island Tourism Information Centre? Because we certainly, and any of our staff that are out and about, will be picking those brochures up, and I'm not discounting them by any means. They're certainly a trigger, but what is the other information that you can maybe attach to the brochure that we're not necessarily going to know about? Are there other tourism or retail enterprises that would dovetail nicely with your suggested angle? So if you are, because I see Roscoe Canoes, I keep thinking canoe. if you know, if...
Well, I was thinking of a local tackle shop that I'm working in at the moment, so I'm thinking a fishing angle, you know, canoe fishing.
Perfect. Perfect. Or, you know, or if you're doing a story on canoeing, you know, talk to the Kinkabool, or however you pronounce it, the information centre that's halfway up the Kinnabar, halfway up the Noosa River, and maybe they have some sort of a bird watching program going on at the moment, or something like that. So have a think about something that can mesh with your business, and we might say, no, there's more than enough with your business on its own, and we'll get to them another time. But otherwise, you know, it's a nice starting point for helping us create a story.
I was just going to say, if the retailers or owners of centres can also bear in mind who are the ones who are encouraging participation. So Alana, I'd like to say also think Queensland
And what touches can you add to make a story more colourful? So in the, in the example of a farm stay where we know that we've already chatted to the owner and we've talked about having a little interview on the back deck over a cup of tea, lovely. There'll be a nice setting and it's a lovely environment. But it's the lady who's gone to the trouble of doing her famous scones or her beautiful tea cake and cooked one of those to have there during the chat. It just adds that extra little dimension, that shot that that makes it makes it stick with people in people's minds more readily, I guess. So there's those little touches you can make, and I guess in your lines of business, the biggest seller is to have extras. You know, if we're going to be at an outdoor education centre and there's our presenter and a couple of volunteers who we can put on camera and pretend are visitors, then that's fine, and we've done that a heap of times. But if you can rally some locals, or if you know that there's a cooperative school or kindy or something like that nearby that can be involved, then all the better. It really adds to what the story's going to be and gets that colour and motion and gets the people, allows us people to interact with our presenter and goes back to that conversation about making the story seem real. So who are the characters involved? Oh, sorry, where am I at? Oh, that's out of order. Apologies. So we are really character-based, our shows. So you'll notice that there is much more interview than there is voiceover. And that's because we're not about... and our presenters tend to not do, in news they call them stand-ups, where you're standing up in front of the action behind you and you're delivering your lines. We do what we call pieces to camera, because we like to think that we're inclusive, but presenting, to camera as part of the action. And a story is so much better a story if it's got people involved, if there's characters. And, the elderly gentleman who's donated something to the historical museum that we are going to, or the person that's been coming to your particular property for 20 years and has a real connection with it, that's really, that's really going to encourage us to do a story if we know that there's something else to say, there's that extra dimension to it. And I don't mean that it all has to be heritage or it all has to be an old timer, but someone with a connection, a personal connection, or someone, either be it operators or visitors, who get that little glimmer in their eye when they talk about what it is that they love about this place, are going to sell a story better than our presenters ever could. So we try to encourage more of that. Is there a local identity, for instance, who is always singing your praises and that you could get to do just that in this occasion? If we have visited before, what's our motivation for coming back this time? Is it because we're previewing an event, or do you have something new? Or is it just the fact that we've got a story that we shot 5 years ago and you wouldn't believe after all this rain how the trees have taken off and now this place is just amazing, and you really need to come and remind us that we've been there before and that we'll be able to do a nice comparison when we drag our old story out of the archives. And of course, how hands-on can our presenter be? Can they milk a cow? Can they try climbing up the bunya pine? What is it that they can do to be involved? When is a better time of day, of week, or year for us to visit? And keeping in mind you're not always going to get the ideal time, and being flexible that you can say it's looking fabulous and green at the moment. If I'm to ring in 6 months' time when it's not that way, do you say, look, no, let's not bother on the off chance that I'll come back this time next year and ask you again, or do you seize the opportunity while you are being offered it? But please, saying to us that if you're here at a particular time of the year, the sunflowers are on the drive on the way in and it's visually a delight, is certainly something that we're likely to put on our calendar as a must remember. Also, do you operate in the wet? Do you operate in high wind? Is this a story that relishes, the elements, and that you can really show this place at its best? Obviously, waterfalls are a story that we've been covering quite a bit in the last couple of weeks, but let us know if it's a wet weather option, because we'll love you forever. So then, once you've cogitated and you have all these thoughts together, what do we need from you? Well, not much. I don't care how, it certainly doesn't need to be prose. I don't care how well written the information is, as long as we have the information, an email, a detailed email or a letter quite suffice. An image or two would be terrific. Certainly not of any quality because we're not going to use that, but just to get an idea. I have been caught a couple of times in pre-scripting stories with our presenter enjoying a beautiful view for her opening piece to camera, only to find that the trees have grown since the photo was on your website and there is no view anymore. So a bit of an update of what the property or the business looks like would be great. Certainly not essential, but more important than that, plenty of lead-in time. The 2-month warning would be terrific. The opportunity to get an idea of what it is that our presenters can do, what else you can offer in terms of a value add, and yeah, just a contact number so we can have a bit of a chat, because we prefer to have a chat. And I understand also that sometimes when you're operating your own business and you're out and about, that's not the easiest thing to do, so we're certainly open to having out-of-hours conversations if that's going to suit better. So we're looking for variety and a good mix of subject matter, so sometimes the information you send us, while it's gratefully received, it might sit in a pile for months. So, and it might seem very rude of us, but we don't always reply. Certainly if you go online to our Great South East, Creek to Coast or Queensland Weekender websites, there is a viewer feedback form which you can use to pitch story ideas, and it will send you a automated thank you very much, your information has been received. It has, it genuinely has. I get those printouts every morning, or that pile. But if you don't hear anything, don't panic, because we're really grateful for the information, but it might just be sitting there for logistical reasons, for instance. So if I've run a couple of bicycling stories recently, it might be a few months before we think about doing that again, or something with horse riding. You'll tend to find that there'll be a glut of a particular activity, and then I have to make a conscious effort not to do too many of them in the one hit. The other thing is that I'm strategically, in creating the jigsaw puzzle that is the Great South East, for instance, I might sit down and look at a 4-week block of programs, and I'm mindful that each program needs to have a north, a south, a country and a city story. That it would be good if one was food-based, one was accommodation-based, one was activity-based, and one was whatever. So I'm trying to do those mixes, and then that I need to have Sophie and Martin and Laurel and Jess in this show, and Champs and Brian with an historical piece. So there's a real jigsaw puzzle that goes with putting these shows together, which is why it might be a while before I have a Champs action outdoors north slot, for argument's sake. So that might be the reason that you might not get approached. Sometimes though, we might just not be interested in the story. Please don't let that discourage you from thinking of another angle or trying again. It could be any number of reasons, I guess, but certainly one of them might be the fact that we've done too many similar stories in recent times, and we're putting that on the back burner. Television is a subjective form. I'm going off to produce the Broncos Insider program for 12 weeks after Easter, so someone else is stepping into my spot for the Great South East. She might have a totally different idea of what it is that she wants to do as stories for the next 2 months. It's so subjective. So having said that, I'm also still receiving my Great South East emails, so anything I like the look of, I'll be flicking her way, don't worry about that. But the point I'm trying to make is that if someone fobs you off, and I'm not just talking about our programs, but in general terms, have another go. You might try somebody else, and you might find someone who's a like-minded soul or can certainly see the value in what it is that you're doing. Stay in touch, don't be afraid to resubmit, and yeah, all the best with it.